From Central Indiana's #1 news source, this is Fox 59 Tonight.
Hey, good evening to you. Thanks for joining us here on Fox 59 Tonight. I'm Cameron Riddle. Appreciate you downloading our new smart TV app on your Fire TV, Roku, and on your Apple TV. Just search Fox 59. Now it's that pretty blue logo on the wall back there. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss any of the conversations that we have every night at 8 o'clock here on Fox 59 Tonight. Today, we will be introducing you to a nonprofit here in Central Indiana that has done some great work. I've got to know them over the years, now serving as part of the board for GLAM and GROOM. But the story starts with a lady who does a lot of work quietly, and there are a lot of nonprofits out there that have a lot of staff. This and do great work. This is a nonprofit that has a very small staff, pretty much one person who does everything, making a big impact with both guys and girls. That person is in our studio tonight. It is Shanel Poole. She's the founder of GLAM and GROOM. Hi, Shanel.
Hi, Cameron. Thank you for having me this morning.
Absolutely glad you could come because I really think people need to know more about GLAM and GROOM and really the effort that you personally have put in to this organization. Pretty much a lot of it with your own money and doing it earning no money for you personally, but you're doing it because you are trying to make a difference in the lives of the youth here in Indianapolis. So let's start off and tell us about how GROOM and GLAM came to be.
Little tongue twister there.
Yes.
Thank you, Cameron, for having me. It's an honor to share with you truly my labor of love. I'll start with GLAM, which stands for Guidance, Life Skills, and Mentoring, founded March 26th of 2008. And GLAM was birthed because I was once the original GLAM girl. Came from a great family, mother and father. Father was Marine veteran, hardworking parents, and just as a young person struggling with self-esteem. Mm-hmm. Early on in life, my father unfortunately suffered from alcoholism, and that had a traumatic impact on my upbringing. Mm-hmm. I would consider myself a daddy girl, and so his behavior impacted how I navigated the world. So about the time I was in 6th grade, I just truly did not have the emotional intelligence to really articulate the stress, mm-hmm. The mental distress, and just the trauma that was taking place at home. And so I rebelled in school, began to get incarcerated. I suffered something that most people don't even identify until they're later in age. I had an early onset of premenstrual syndrome, which caused for me to be incarcerated the first month of my cycle. So just to think about an 11 and a 12-year-old constantly getting arrested once a month every year, it began to label me and put a stigma behind me. I was in Shortridge Magnet program at the time, suffered a lot of bullying throughout my academic years, and just really did not know how to reach out for help, didn't know how to communicate that to my parents. And so anger became one of the factors as a result of dealing with some of those adverse childhood experiences. Was led to Indiana Girls School by the time I was 15. So society pretty much had written me off, had made a decision that I would end up in women's prison. And as a young woman, my grandmother always instilled the faith of God in me. And so that was literally my foundation, is to continue to keep my faith in God despite being from 11 years old in and out of pretty much the prison system. And so at 15 years old, once I seen the trajectory of my life headed towards women's prison, I truly struggled to find a way out. Mm-hmm. And so every year after being released, I would be readmitted back to the Indiana Department of Girls School. So I spent my sweet 16 in prison on mm-hmm. parole. And so I just didn't have the traditional upbringing, and mm-hmm. that's not a negative to my parents. I think mm-hmm. it's all a result of the calling that's been on my life since birth. And so at 16, I really made a decision, and I think that's where the self-accountability took place. Mm-hmm. I combined my faith and the support of mentors And I said I wanted to change. And so I struggled from 16 to 18 trying to navigate getting off of parole. For a lot of young people, once you're in the system, it is truly, truly hard to get out of it. And once you have been labeled as a statistics, there's a financial amount that follows you to hopes that you end up in prison. And so for me as a young woman, having that label really kept me away from building healthy relationship with my peers. I didn't have traditional education, so I kind of lost the community of friends and peers that I would traditionally grow up with and graduate high school with. I ended up suffering from rape, got pregnant at 16 years old. And so trying to find love in all the wrong places, not respecting my parents. I was extremely defiant and rebellious. And I say that because a lot of parents are constantly struggling with when they hit the puberty age. For a lot of girls, we just truly don't know how to balance the hormones, and we don't really have the emotional intelligence that we need. So we tend to take it out on our parents. And as a result, I was one of those children that took a lot of my anger and frustrations out on my mom and on my dad. And even now, I still regret that, because spiritually, I was raised that, honor your mother and your father, or your days will be numbered. And I started to realize that my days were definitely being numbered based on the lifestyle that I was living. And I would take time and think about how I treated my parents, who were truly trying to lead me down the right path. Despite some of the shortcomings that they were dealing with, they still were amazing parents, but I just didn't understand. I thought I was missing out on something. I wanted attention from boys at a young age, just not really knowing how to properly develop. And so by the time I was 18, because of my disrespect and rebelliousness, and because of being labeled a juvenile delinquent and trying to navigate being on the parole system, reporting to the parole office, doing community service, when you're that young, you cannot even build relationships, because one false move will lead you right back to that prison system. So I found myself isolated from pretty much society, with a chip on my shoulder.
Now, Shanel, I'm gonna ask something that I'm not supposed to ask. How old are you now?
I'm 42 now.
And when you were going through being at the girls' school, what age were you finally released, and that you were free, and then you were starting try to figure out what life was going to be?
At 16, my faith had really grown while I was incarcerated, and just in all transparency, I knew that God was going to be the only way that I got out of the prison system. My family had did all that they could. The education system had already written me off. So I had to truly test God to see if God was truly real. And I did that by asking for a second chance. I was committed to 1 year in Indiana girls' school, but through faith and good behavior, I only end up doing 91 days my second time. And so my issue was that I was not going to be allowed to go back to Indiana girls' school. They were going to send me to women's prison. So I had been in the system from 11 to 16 and had built such a bad reputation that it was already written in stone that I would be transferred over to women's prison.
So let me ask you this, because it's hard knowing what you do now and seeing how you operate, that you between 11 and 16 were that much of a problem. What were you doing?
So honestly, I feel like when you deal with trauma in the home, just, in transparency, alcoholism, I feel like I was replicating the behavior of what I seen my dad, and it's sensitive to talk about my family, but I have to be transparent. When you see your father put his hands on your mother, especially as a child, that is the biggest trauma. That is the biggest experience of fear that you can experience. Your mother is your heart. And so that level of domestic violence, it trickled over in school. So I replicated what I seen at home. My father was very verbal abusive and argumentative. So I took that same energy to class. I was angry at God during that time because I felt like, what's the purpose of honoring your parents if my father is mistreating my mom? So how do you respect somebody that is mistreating and harming the woman that you love the most?
Mm-hmm.
Your mother and your father is your first love.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you don't know how to navigate that emotion, it turns into anger. And when you're dealing with low self-esteem because you really don't know your worth. People make fun of you. For me, people used to talk about how big my eyes were or how skinny I was. And so that impacted me. We grew up in an era where they say sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt. Verbal abuse is real.
Mm-hmm.
So I was angry because a lot of my trauma was verbal abuse. So when I went to class, I could not cope with basic algebra, science, because I still was thinking about the fact that I was angry at my dad for putting his hands on my mom,
Mm-hmm.
or the fact that we have to go stay with another relative for this week, and my mom has to navigate how to get me to school and get my older brothers and sisters to high school. So it was stress as a child coming to school every single day and not having teachers or adults in my educational life that actually took time out to get to learn me and understand what I was going through as a child. It just continued to add to that rebellion because I didn't have anybody that understood me. And then when you have peers that are picking on you day to day and they not know that you're dealing with a lot of mental distress,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to find out ways to defend yourself and stick up for yourself, especially when you don't see the adults in your life sticking up for you and taking up for you. And that's pretty much how it happened for me. And then physically, it turned into fights because just like kids today, I was being picked on. I was physically assaulted at school. So what other choice do I have but to defend myself?
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that I did not have a trusted adult outside of my parents that took the time out to really see what was the reasons that I was acting out in school.
So I know some people like to say, or some people like to say that there's no such thing as a bad kid. So, but the problems that you had were when you were a kid, when you were a child. By the time you got to adulthood, you had learned, but we're still learning, but dealing with those consequences of what you did when you were 11 through 16 years old. What was it, though, that finally made you say, this is not the life that I want to have?
Well, at 18, I just got off of parole. I was working to get off of parole. So one was that I already knew that my outcome was women's prison.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first result. I'm 18 and I'm now on my second abortion. So financially, I do not have the money to take care of children. I've just had a second abortion. Thirdly, my level of disrespect to my parents caused for them to have to put me out of the home. So by 17, I had a police escort removing me from my parents' home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I learned that this system was working against me.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nobody that was coming to save me. So my mentality was, well, if the system has already made its mind up that I was going to be in prison, that I was going to be a single parent, I was going to be uneducated, I started to think, what did I need to change the trajectory of my life? Because I went from being a magnet student, a straight A student, a student that had a desire to be an attorney, to now on parole. So I prayed to God, July of 2002, and I pretty much, just like I shared earlier, I tested God to see if God was real. And I said, God, if you don't do something tonight, that I was going to take my own life, because my relationships were horrible. I was dealing with shootouts. I already had these charges against me that are now going to be rolled over to adult. And I already had these parents who were frustrated, like many parents are right now. So when you find yourself living in a car, nobody in your family wants to take you in, you've disrespected every source of support that you've had. And even in transparency, I had a bad experience experience in church. My pastor tried to sleep with me and proposition me for sex. So another system had failed me. So I took that to God and I said, God, the church at this time has failed me. My family is dysfunction and they ready to give up on me. I'm already on parole and the system has already made their mind up that I'm not going to be no good. And I've already had unhealthy relationships. So I have nothing left but to give God a try. And so when I cried out in that car, I heard the Holy Spirit say, turn left. And I was right there off of 16th and Tremont. I remember Long's Bakery. I'm not from the Hallville community. I grew up on 30th and Martin Luther King. So this was a new environment for me. And so when I heard that voice, what are the options that I have but to listen? I made a left turn and I just felt the Spirit leading me. I looked up, I was in the 500 block of Tremont in a place that said Christ A. Moore. And because I was institutionalized, I was looking for a safe haven. I was looking for a women's shelter. Because my mother had experienced domestic violence, I knew that there were shelters and places that took women in. So I was looking for a safe place, being that I had nowhere to live, somewhere where I could be in a new environment with new people that will be willing to help me, being that I did not have any income. The commitment that I made to God as I was driving down that street is that if He made a change in my life that night, I was going to commit to a change. And so at that time, when I seen the place, not knowing that it was the actual Christamore house, I thought it was a church or a shelter for women. And so when I went to the Christamore house at about 7 o'clock at night, Reverend Jimmy Harrington answered the door. They were actually closing and he asked, how could he help me? And I said, I was looking for somewhere to volunteer because I had a servant mindset that what could I do for free for God? What could I do for free to show people that I was a good person versus all the labeling that people had put on me from 11 years old. And so Reverend Jimmy Harrington opened up the door, sat down and talked with me. And I'll be honest, I was very hesitant to talk with him because I felt, here go another pastor. All these systems had failed me. So I had this negative stigma against the church, against the schools, against police, and sometimes even against family. And so we talked for about 2 hours and I shared my testimony in tears. And he asked me if I needed to be put in a hotel, and I didn't want to accept any services from him. I wanted to stay in my car because I felt like I didn't owe anything in return. And when you've experienced sexual abuse, when you've been raped, you don't really want to accept anything from men because you feel like you have to give something in return. And so I used to drive around 465 at nighttime, and that was my way of not letting people know what I was going through. 465 was just a big circle, so it allowed me that time to pray, release, cry, but I felt like I wasn't a burden to anybody, and I felt like I was living off the land. And so I drove around 465 that night. He asked me to come back at 10 o'clock that morning, and they were going to help me. So I felt God had intervened and kept me from committing suicide, led me to an organization that was going to provide me help if I just kept the faith and came back the next morning, which is what I did. Ogen Williams, Dion Leslie, Greg Wilson, and Reverend Jimmy Harrington were all the staff that I did not know. I did not know that these were amazing leaders in the city of Indianapolis. I just knew that I was on parole and I needed somebody to give me a chance. I had enrolled in Toastmasters because I had a mindset of what can I do without having a GED or high school diploma. So I ended up being a member of Toastmasters International at 18. And so when I came back to the Christopher House, they were waiting on me. And I was hesitant because I was intimidated by Reverend Ogen Williams, because again, here go another pastor. And we went back and forth because I shared about, how I was disrespectful to my parents. And he had a problem with children who were disobedient to their parents. As many people know, Mr. Williams, he's definitely a man of God. And so, we went back and forth. And then God had my mentor at the time, Dion Leslie. She wrote down a sheet of paper and she said, how can we help you? And I had never had anybody sit across me and say, how can they help? I've had so many people people tell me about me, tell me what they're going to do for me, or tell me how I should be. But I had never had anyone sit down and just ask me, what is it that I need and how can they help? So I wrote down 10 things, and I remember the first 3 were to get my GED, to get a job at Anthem, and to go to college. And within 91 days of being a part of the Christopher House Youth Employment Services, getting connected with people like Mayor Bart Peterson and Susan Brooks, who was the Attorney General at the time, it gave me a voice. And so the Christopher House put me in a position where I could tell my story. I could release my pain to the public.
I was going to say, does Christopher House know this story today?
Yes. They do.
Okay.
And they do because they also helped me to win a car in 2006 by sharing this story. So when you say, how did that shift happen? It was 2 things that happened. Prayer, asking God to make a change right now, and then mentorship. Having a nonprofit organization that had the doors open, that didn't charge me to be there, and was willing to offer me services free of charge to get me to where I needed to be. And so again, within 91 days, Ms. Dion Leslie took me in her home. So now I'm living no longer in my car, but I'm living with one of the staff members. Who she was single at the time with no children. So she had the ability to take me in. Every day, the organization was enrolling me in services that they provided, such as providing me $200 gift cards to go buy work clothes. Because remember, I want a job at Anthem. So how am I going to get a job if I'm on parole, living in a car, and don't even have the basic needs? So this organization was financially putting up the bill. That was making me come back every single day. This organization sat me down in a computer lab and actually helped me to do the resume. So with that support, I had the faith and the confidence now to go study for my GED. Glory be to God for Mrs. Stovall at the Flanner House, because she was able to work with me based on my situation. So I was able to study for my GED as an independent student. Because sometimes being in those toxic environments, being around the same peers that mistreated you, it can shut you down. So they developed a way to take care of me as an independent 18-year-old versus putting me in a group of people trying to make me conform to what the rest of the population was. So that individual care did a lot for me. That individual time of them treating me based on my needs, it did a lot for me. And so I end up studying for my GED. I passed my GED within 90 days. I was already a member of Toastmasters at Anthem. My first icebreaker, for those who are familiar with Toastmasters, was my testimony.
I was going to say, explain to people what Toastmasters is.
So Toastmasters is a professional public speaking bureau that teaches you how to do public speaking starting at 18 years old. And it's about a year of a programming that allows you to go through 12 different modules, which are 12 different public speaking sessions, topics that you will speak on in front of a group of professionals, whether that's colleagues, whether that's at a church setting, but these are all professional adults who want to do better at public speaking. And so for me, I knew I had the gift of gab, so that was the only environment that I thought was feasible for me when you don't have traditional education. And when you think about a lot of 18-year-olds right now, when we think about the services that they need education, they need employment, they need housing, and they need some type of mentor or coach. And so when I shared my testimony at Toastmasters, I shared with them that I had recently passed my GED. And so they walked me up to the HR and helped me to get a job at a Ministar Federal. So when we talk about God, I asked for 3 things. I asked for a GED. I asked for a job at Anthem, which I received employment at Anthem through a Ministar Federal, and I asked to go to college. I had received a Pell Grant. And so my faith and my confidence changed because most people didn't know that I had this private conversation with God on the verge of suicide. So for me, I didn't need any validation from anybody. And for me, I knew that the Christian house was being used by God and was an answered prayer. So I took advantage of everything that was coming from a group of strangers. I did not know them from anywhere.
Mhm.
And I want to put emphasis on that because of people don't realize the impact of a stranger in your life and what they can do for you.
Well, that is the first time I've heard the entire story of what happened pre 18 years old for me. I've heard bits and pieces. But that is the pre-story
Mm-hmm.
to Groom and Glam, because your organization is trying to make sure that young men and young women don't ever have to even experience what you went through.
Absolutely.
So we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about that side. That was the before. Now we're going to talk about what you're doing now with these organizations, and what type of girls and what type of guys you are welcoming into your program where they are in life. Because again, the goal is so that they never have the experiences that you have. And what I was listening for in your story was I was waiting for you to tell me what person was it that kind of hit you on the head and say, wake up, pay attention.
Dion Leslie.
But it was before that. I was trying to figure out what your breaking point was when you were in that car.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to figure out who's the person that said, is this what you're going to keep doing? And it was that you were completely out of options. You didn't have anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have a Shanel Poole or a Groom or Glam. And now that is the void that you are filling for other people. So
Absolutely.
now I get the full story.
Absolutely.
And I hope other people do too. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more Fox 59 tonight after this.